This is part 3 of Unit 2, Prominence in the Utterance. So this is a very quick recap of what we have seen in part 2 in Unit 2. So we have dealt with the paradigmatic choice in discourse prominence. In particular, we have concentrated on Brazil's system regarding prominence, which is their general and existential paradigm. And we have also tackled the role of the interaction in the existential paradigm when we want to assign prominence to particular words or phrases.
In order to understand the prominence system that we're going to use in this unit, we have to make a connection with the concept of meaning. But we have to be very careful because the meaning as a concept has different interpretations, different definitions, okay, mostly based on the discipline that uses that particular concept. Like, for example, in semantics, the concept of meaning is quite different from the concept of pragmatic meaning. And so the concept that we're going to use is meaning as a continuum of elements which make meaning distinctions from the semantic to the pragmatic levels. And this will be seen in Figure 2. To this purpose, the definition of pragmatics and pragmatic meaning by Thornberry is very useful. So we're going to take into account here the speaker choices as to what syllables are going to be prominent and what syllables are going to be non-prominent. The syllables that are going to be prominent may be due to their communication relevance or sometimes based on linguistic or co-textual restrictions then. So we're going to see that in Figure 2. So in Figure 2, we can see the factors that constrain prominence syllable selection, but also the accentuation and non-prominent syllables. So in every context of interaction, as we have also read from authors like Brazil and so on, the speaker is going to make a first semantic selection. Okay, the selection of prominent syllables at the first level are going to be constrained by lexical, phonological, grammatical rules, like, for example, word stress or the syllabic structure of the particular language, the morphological or syntactic structure. And these are mostly test-based decisions on what items are going to be prominent or non-prominent. These items at the semantic level express facts, truth, ideas, emotions, and so on then. In an intermediate position, these words then and so on there, and prominence actually impinges on this, may make up conversation routines or idiomatic expressions or speech acts then. But the difference with the first group is that although there is still a connection to linguistic rules, like for example, there are certain limitations on what items are going to be made prominent in a conversation routine, they acquire a pragmatic meaning which goes beyond then the semantic meaning. So we're talking about the conversation routines as expressed in speech acts, as being imbued in a particular speech event or activity type, or related to a particular type of text, and so on there. And then once the linguistic aspect has been covered, then speakers and interlocutors will make decisions that are more pragmatically related. Okay, for this, some other contextual factors are going to be addressed, like the cultural knowledge between the speakers, the group membership of affiliation, the stance or the ideologies that they have, which make up what Brazil calls the state of understanding. That is, if you remember the concept of the general versus the existential paradigm, that is, these factors that we have here that are not linguistically related then are the ones that are going to affect language in particular, and language choice, and in this particular case, the prominence choice or the non-prominence. These decisions are, as we said, context-based. Then, okay, they are not linguistically or text-based. Okay, and some of them, these choices are the result of certain inferences made by the listeners, or some implicatures that the speakers want to convey. So we're going to see this, all the elements from this particular chart then in detail later on.
So we're going to start now with the first dimension of prominence selection, in particularly the one that we call the semantic sense selection, that is at the level of the word. So one of the first elements that we can see there is word stress. So prominence will be based on word stress. That is the allocation of stress. We know that from a linguistic viewpoint will have to do with the syllabic structure of the word, with the morphological constitution or the syntactic function that the word has then. And all of these factors will contribute to the particular characteristic of English rhythm, which is stress time rhythm. In terms of the open class of words, that is the type of words that are typically made prominent, we know that generally content words tend to have prominence because they have an inherent communicative value, okay, in opposition to the structural words, which are mostly functional and just serve to as a cohesive way to join words and so on then. In terms of morphology, we also know that free morphemes are the ones that would typically receive stress, in contrast to the bound morphemes, which are generally unstressed then. Whenever we have polysyllabic words or compound words, we may have, and we know this, 2 or more levels of stress. Okay, not just the primary stress, but we could also consider another a stress that is called the secondary stress, which is not as loud or long as the primary stress, but still louder and longer than the unstressed syllables then. Regarding the syntactic function, sometimes the position of the words in a particular phrase, sentence, or utterance, okay, will provoke, because of rhythmical variation, a particular phenomenon called the stress shift. You are familiar with this, in which, okay, the primary stress becomes secondary stress, and the secondary stress will become primary stress. So, but this is only restricted at the level of, the syntactic function and on the role of these words in a particular context, not a broader context. And rhythmical variations may also be applied when we talk about genericity, in the sense that certain words like a thing and stuff and so on there, that is, which have a general meaning, will tend to be unstressed and therefore non-prominent. There is a very special phenomenon, which is a syntactic phenomenon, in which sometimes 3 words which form a tightly knit syntactic unit may have a particular stress pattern or prominence pattern, in which generally the first and the last elements, we can talk about the first and the third element take prominence, but not the second, unless the word in second place is longer and is longer than 2 syllables, for example. Another factor that may have an implication on the choice of stress and therefore prominence is collocation. Okay, in terms of this, we can talk about certain words that will receive a prominence and not others when they go together. We're talking about, for example, read a book, in which book will probably receive a prominence and not read, unless there is contrast, as we have seen before. Or look at a picture, in which picture is probably more prominent than look at, and so on. In some cases of reformulation, if we remember the paradigmatic relationships that Brazil discussed before, okay, there could be some phenomena that can affect prominence. For example, the syntagmatic influence of syntax, the semantics, and discourse in prominence. For David Brazil, remember in his traditional notion of the paradigmatic relationships in which we have the existential paradigm and the general paradigm then, okay, that selection, remember, from words in the general paradigm and their, let's say, synthesis into the existential paradigm, that is, involves a larger symptom than the word, and it is not just, okay, the word, it is the tonic segment for David Brazil, okay? So this figure comes to exemplify the notion of the selection from the general paradigm into an existential paradigm. So, for example, in in a particular interaction, whenever we want to express some ideas and so on, and in particular we want to mention someone, then we may refer to that particular person in different ways, like, for example, Tom Smith, the vicar, a friend Mary's, my partner, Harry's former colleague, and so on there. But so all the possibilities of the language system, it means that we can have the noun phrases, and the proper nouns and so on that are particular for that general paradigm. But when we do make the selection, which is in this case, then from all these possibilities of the general paradigm, we reduce them to only the ones that will be relevant, okay, to name a person or to talk about a person. And so from all these possibilities, we just select then the syllable V from vicar, because this is the way that we're going to mention someone. But you may have had the impression that all the paradigmatic relationships between certain words there that take us from the general paradigm to the existential paradigm is only between words, for example, of a particular grammatical category and so on. But this is not the case then. Okay, Brazil says that, okay, that a choice that the speaker makes them, okay, maybe not just between two particular words that belong to a grammatical category, but that could be between, okay, two tone units in this case that express the same idea, but with different connotations or with different contextual implications. Okay, so we have here an example, okay, in which the character in a sitcom then says that she's talking about a woman, and she says that woman wound up walking on the street selling drugs. But then he realizes that that was not actually the idea that he wanted to convey, and so he reformulates that by corrects himself, or in conversational analysis terms, he repairs, self-repairs, okay, his speech by saying she's a pharmaceutical rep, okay, and then he adds, then I phrase that so badly. And so you can see here that selling drugs will be made sort of equivalent to pharmaceutical rep then. But why does he change? Why does he change then, okay, the two options? Because we know that, okay, whereas selling drugs will be discussing, okay, something that could be controversial and so on. By saying it in a different way, like she's a pharmaceutical rep, then he's trying to be euphemistic about that, and he doesn't have the connotations, okay, of that particular woman being a drug dealer.